Everybody, welcome to the Cubic Theatre. I'm Mike Southgate. I'm chair of the Friends of the London Transport Museum, and I've volunteered to oversee this evening's event and to introduce our speaker. First of all, the usual safety and notices. If you've got mobile phones, can you switch them off or at least put them to silent in order not to interrupt the proceedings? Emergency exits are in that direction and that direction. There are no fire alarm, or there are no tests scheduled for this evening, so if the alarm goes off, it might be wise to exit and follow the direction of some of the staff, and I'll be out there first, all right? So you can follow me. The next meetings that are coming up, on the 13th of May, we've got Graham Roy from the historic Croydon Airport Trust on Croydon Airport, the glory years of air travel, which presumably before it became London Gatwick. There's a lot of information about it on the website. I won't read it out. Interested in that one, bookings on the website, usual. And then on 23rd of May at Acton, we've got Ian Gledhill on the Folks Electric Railway, which I have to say is on my bucket list of things to do, and I've never got round to doing it. So that'll be an interesting one to go to. But tonight's presentation, I'm delighted to introduce Martijn Gilbert. He's the MD for FirstGroup's open access rail operations, which are Lumo and Hull Trains. He's also a board member for Tram Operations, running the Croydon system. Martijn started his career with London Underground, but has had a illustrious career in the bus business, becoming MD for Go Ahead's regional operation in the North East, and previously Chief Executive of Reading Buses. I think open access is one of the things that I think is quite fascinating about the rail industry, because I think it's one of the ways that the world's moving forward. So it'd be wonderful to hear what Martin's got to say. Martin?
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. I shall make sure I've put this on. There we go. Right, hopefully you can all hear me now. Great. Real pleasure and honour to be sitting... Oh, there we go. Real pleasure and honour to be back here at the London Transport Museum. I think I gave a talk here, was about 6-7 years ago. I was just leaving, maybe longer than that, Reading Buses and going to Go Ahead. And I came to talk about buses then, and I'm back tonight to talk about trains. What a complimentary thing that is. And this is the second time that I've actually worked in rail. Back earlier on in my career when I was working for Arriva, part of the bus company that I was working for was bought by Arriva. We did lots of rail replacement bus and coach operations, and I went on a 6-month secondment to their rail division and ended up staying there for 5 years. So it's not my first time that I've been in rail, but I've been now the MD of FirstGroup's open access rail operations for just over 18 months. It's a very exciting time for open access rail. We are unencumbered from some of the things that are going on around the rest of the rail sector in terms of contracts and some of the rail reform that's going on there. We are a purely commercial business, and we get on and deliver, as I'm about to tell you during the presentation there. And yeah, as Mike's mentioned during his introduction, I also have reporting into me First's Tram contract to run the Croydon Tram on behalf of TfL, and then from the end of June I'll have a cable car in my portfolio as well, because we've just won the contract to do that. But you know all about the tram being here in London, and I can't really tell you anything about the cable car yet because we haven't started it, but we will do by the end of June. It's a great operation, and we're really looking forward to having that as part of our portfolio. But tonight I've come to talk about open access rail operations, so I'll go through a bit of an introduction to it, and we'll take questions at the end. For those of you who weren't here the last time I came to speak at wonderful events, I've got J in my first name. It's a silent J. It's a Dutch spelling of Martin. It's a very complicated story as to why on earth I have a Dutch spelling of my first name, but it's to do with the sport of pigeon racing, and I don't even race pigeons. But there we go. If you really want to know, you can come and ask me about it afterwards. So, open access rail operations. So the two businesses that I look after in First's rail portfolio, Lumo and Hull Trains, are two of 3 long-distance open access rail operations here in the UK, and they are fully commercial businesses. So we live or die by getting people on board our trains and making them a success commercially. We are still subject to all the same standards of operation in terms of safety and regulation and the access arrangements on the tracks through Network Rail. So although these are smaller businesses, and we'd like to think we're sort of more agile and responsive in terms of what we do because of our size and the entrepreneurial spirit that runs through them, we still have to adhere to those very high standards around safety and all of the track access arrangements, including the bidding for timetables, the timetable approval process with Network Rail, and then all of the customer-facing aspects that sit behind there in terms of making sure the information is available, the retailing standards for where you buy your tickets, and all of the things around engineering works and customer support during disruption, and the accessibility standards as well. So quite a balance to be a sort of small, lean, mean entrepreneurial machine, but also adhere to those very big industry standards. But we do it, and we do it thanks to our great people. We have teams locally based in both Hull, for Hull Trains, funnily enough, and then Lumo is based in Newcastle. And they're very different markets, as I'm going to go on and touch a little bit on in a minute. But there are some synergies between the two businesses as well. It's a little bit more than just being open access rail operations. And they have both seen substantial investment in recent years, and they are both really delivering growing customer numbers as well. The third open access operation, long distance, is of course Grand Central, which is owned by Arriva. That's 2 routes, one to Bradford and one to Sunderland. And then technically Heathrow Express, although not a long distance operation, is also classed as open access. That's structured slightly differently in that the contract to operate that goes through the Great Western Rail contract, but it is technically an open access operation as well. And you'll have heard, I'm sure, lots more talk of open access in recent months and years. Ian Yowett, who was one of the founders of Grand Central, he's gone it alone again and has been granted access rights on both the Great Western Main Line for a service from Carmarthen to Paddington, and more recently down the West Coast Main Line from Stirling to London. So that's really exciting that we will hopefully see more of this type of operation from other organisations as well. And then just in recent weeks, Alstom have come forward as the backers in partnership with an organisation called SLC Rail to resurrect a Wrexham and Shropshire open access operation, but this time with a slightly different routing and going into London Euston. So it's definitely something that there is, we believe, a gap in the market for and more interest for, and that it can deliver, most importantly, for the customers who use our services. So without further ado, let's give you a little bit more detail on who and what they are. So Hull Trains, it is now in its 24th year of operation. It is the original open access operator, whilst it was not getting too political, conservative legislation. Actually, the access rights were granted under a Labour government in 2000, and that has grown in those 24 years now to be a team of 125 people based in the city of Hull. It's a fleet of 5 trains. They are bi-mode trains, so we run under the wires in electric mode where we can, and then when we come off at Doncaster onto the line to Hull, we then go into diesel mode, but it's a clean diesel. And even a pure diesel train, I think it's worth noting, is far better in terms of environmental credentials per customer than going by road, and certainly a lot better than going by air. So we shouldn't necessarily think that the diesel element is as nasty as some might make out. It's still a lot greener. It's still a huge step forward. And of course, the latest generation Hitachi trains, very clean diesel as well. Now, because we are the main operator on this route, before Hull Trains started in 2000, there was 1 direct train a day under the state-specified system, if you like, for want of a better word, between Hull and London, just 1 direct train a day. There's now 8 direct trains a day, so we are the main operator. So Hull Trains is a bit more of a traditional offer. It's got both a first class and a standard class offering, and we very much fill the space as the main operator between the city of Hull and then across through Brough, Howden, Selby, joining the East Coast Main Line at Doncaster, and then stopping at Retford and Grantham, and then into London King's Cross. And that's now up to 97 services a week. So over those 24 years, we've grown the services from Hull from 1 to 8 today. Those trains have also got faster because it started with 100 mile an hour rolling stock, class 170s, if people are into that sort of thing, and now it's 125 mile an hour rolling stock, and those trains have got longer. The 222 fleet that was introduced a few years after launch were longer trains, and now the Hitachi trains are longer carriages, and we're running increasingly 10-carriage trains on many journeys, which is double the length of those already longer trains. So a really great story of growth and investment over its near 24 years, and we're really looking forward to celebrating next year the 25th birthday of not just Hull Trains, but also the 25th birthday of open access rail operations being live on the UK's rail network. Lumo, completely different. It is Edinburgh, Newcastle, London, with a brief stop at Morpeth and Stevenage, and you think, well, there's already great train services between those places, and there are. And that's why Lumo is different. It's had to do something very different to make the case as to why it should be granted access rights to run those services, and how it can pass, because we are regulated. I mentioned the regulator earlier. The regulator approves access applications and has to satisfy themselves that an open access rail operator isn't just going to take passengers from other train services. We've got to prove that we're going to do something new and different to grow the market. We have to pass something called an NPA test, a not primarily abstractive test, and that's an economic test by some very intelligent economic people who are far better than I am at economics, but these operations have done it, and the proof is in the pudding in terms of the numbers. So Lumo, its proposition is about focusing on shifting journeys away predominantly from domestic aviation. So the Edinburgh-London aviation route is the busiest domestic aviation route in the UK. I believe that there's huge opportunity, and it's been proved in the numbers, to shift people from air to rail, but also there are road journeys as well. There is long-distance coach. There are people driving, and those same points apply, albeit on a slightly different scale proportionally, from Newcastle to London as well. And then from places like Morpeth, which is actually underserved in terms of connections to London, and then conversely Stevenage for destinations north. So you've got a nice blend there of the traditional principles of open access, which has been around creating new links or better connecting places, and then your Edinburgh and Newcastle market in Lumo is about doing something different. So on a Lumo train, there is no first and standard class, it's one class, and there is a huge focus on making sure we deliver really great value fares to our customers, and that we do it with the very best sustainability credentials. So it's an all-electric train fleet, and that green sustainability focus flows through everything that we do. We're paper-free in our offices, a lot of digital work practices. Our food and drink menu on the trolley, 50% of it is plant-based. Even a high proportion of colleague uniforms are recyclable or made from recycled materials. So this is about being cheaper and greener, and therefore I like to think of the Lumo offer as being, if you like, a sort of third tier in the market. And they often say to people, you want first class, LNER do it really well, and we coexist alongside them. They are in growth as well, when I come to talk about some numbers in a minute. If you want to be able to take lots of luggage with you, if you want the flexibility of a train every half an hour or an hour clock face timetable, that's what they provide. What we provide is a really good value fare that's also really green, for a set train. And actually the average consumer on the price wants a cheap fare and is prepared on a long distance journey to commit to getting on a specific timetable train, and that's the space in the market that we feel, and it's proved hugely popular, and it has definitely shifted the dial on domestic aviation away from air and onto rail. Some people call it the sort of low-cost airline of the railway, and it is akin to a low-cost model in many of the things that it does. But actually on board a Lumo train, it's also a really good offer on board. If you've ever been on board, we've got very good legroom. We would argue a more comfortable seat than your average standard class seat on our modern long-distance train. We've got a ginormous fold-down table that's one of the largest in the industry, that you can get both a laptop and a mouse or a notepad next to it as well. We've got USB as well as a 3-pin charging point at every single seat. We've got a seat back light on the back of seats as well, and of course we've got a great friendly team of colleagues on board delivering that service. So it is far from a sort of, shove them in, pilot high, sell it cheap type service. A lot of thought has gone into giving a good quality experience on board. But we do prioritise selling seats, and that's how we keep the fares down low, and therefore we have a fair luggage policy. So people can bring a wheeled suitcase and a carry-on item with them. You can't bring the kitchen sink and multiple things and bikes and all the rest of it. If you want to do that, go with one of the others. You pay a price for that, as you would do on an airline. I mean, actually our free luggage limits are far more generous than a low-cost airline anyway. And for the average person, the average traveller, that works. That's more than enough luggage capacity, and that enables us to have that low fare, great value offer. So yeah, one class offer and 70 services a week, a fleet of 5 electric trains. And this launched just 2 and a bit years ago, October 2021, and really proud of what the team has achieved there, and it's going on to deliver great things. So just reflecting, I've been in both organisations now just over 18 months. I inherited a really great team, some great plans. What's happened since I've joined both the businesses and got the pleasure of working with these teams. Well, certainly Hull Trains, which I mentioned at the start, an open access operator, has full commercial risk. It has to take the rough with the smooth. Well, during the depths of lockdowns, Hull Trains was actually mothballed. It was actually shut down and temporarily ceased operation because there wasn't the demand there. It couldn't sustain the costs. It's a commercial business. There's no subsidy. There's no contract. So it is now not only back, but it's back, and we like to think better than ever in terms of the number of train services that we're running, the reliability of the services, because that brand new fleet of Hitachi trains was introduced in 2019, just before the pandemic started circling and lockdowns happened. So it didn't really get the momentum around bringing a brand new, far more reliable train service into their operations. That's in now. The timetables continue to grow. We're running more 10-car trains, adding capacity in, and we've just brought back standard class catering, which I know has been written about occasionally in the columns of Barry Doe in some of the rail magazines. It's back now. That was the last piece of where things were repurposed coming out of the pandemic to try and keep costs down. This is about trying to give people good value fares as well. Hull Trains too. We have to make sure that when we have additional costs such as train catering, it's done proportionally. So that's back now, but we've not just brought it back. We've brought it back in a way that's working with local providers. So we've got crisps that are made on the route. We actually go past the farm that's got where the potatoes are made, and then they're baked and bagged in Gaul, which we go pretty near to on the route. We've got a beer that's brewed by the Atom Brewery in Hull. We use River City coffee in first class. So really good community partnerships working with organisations there. And Hull Trains in the few most recent examples of the ORR's passenger surveys, we've actually led the way in terms of growth. Again, it's fully recovered back to pre-pandemic levels and has grown. Depending what quarter of the year you take, peak off peak season, in some cases up to 30% growth now, and that's really positive, because if you look at the East Coast Main Line, and if you haven't worked out by now, I'm very passionate about open access, and I think that what it does stimulate growth across the whole market and does benefit everybody. That all long distance operators on the East Coast Main Line have fully recovered to their 2019 pre-pandemic levels of passenger numbers and have grown. And that's with the addition of Lumo on the tracks, which didn't exist prior to the pandemic. So it can't be no accident that the one part of the UK's rail network that has fully recovered and grown is the one where you've got a vibrant band, if you like, of entrepreneurial, commercially focused operators that are helping to bring that choice for customers, a bit of healthy competition, and most importantly, keep fares keen for customers and keep what's being operated sharp and innovative and really focused. So we're big advocates for this model of operation, and I think the work of ourselves and Grand Central and the response that generates from incumbents such as LNER is very healthy for the market, and the numbers have really borne that out. So Lumo has now celebrated its second birthday. That was October last year. It's carried 2 million customers over those 2 years, so we're carrying just over 1 million customers a year. Of those 2 million customers that we celebrated at our second birthday, it was estimated that 1.6 million of those journeys were very likely shifted modally from other modes of transport. And that, on the Edinburgh-London corridor, is the equivalent of up to 8,800 flights. We've done some more scientific work that sits behind that. Arup, the transport consultancy, has actually done some scoping out of our emissions credentials. We can say with some confidence, because it's backed up by science, that going by Lumo is 95% less carbon intensive than flying, and we have an average fare of £40. And I'll talk about how that compares to air later in the presentation. But as I said earlier, Lumo is about a great value offer and a sustainability focus, and it is proving very popular. So I said I'll talk about the fares in a moment. Actually, it was the next slide. There we go. Here it is. So look, Lumo's business model is new in terms of open access. This has not been done before in terms of going away from that traditional approach of open access can open up new links to underserved areas to actually you could take this model of operation and put it into areas that are already seemingly well served, and actually it could be a stimulus to grow the market. And the shift away from aviation and I'll talk about Sheffield towards the end. That slide really is towards the end, about how we think that can also be shifted from road journeys onto rail, is a very credible proposition, and there is quite a sizable market out there to go after. So we already know that travelling by train is far greener than flying, and I can give you science behind Lumo's numbers to show just how much that is in terms of kilogram to equivalent. But, as I said earlier, even a diesel train, even if we use a diesel train, it'd still be about 4 times greener than flying statistic there. On price, some of you may be sitting there thinking, well, I've seen £9.99 Ryanair flights from Edinburgh to Luton, so how can your average fare of £40, Martin, and indeed, as you get closer to the point of booking and the train gets busier and it gets to near £80, how can that possibly be competitive? Well, it is, because very few people who manage to pick up a £9.99 low-cost airline flight inevitably end up paying £9.99 by the time you've wanted to bring a bag on board, or you want to do something around queuing or whatever. But let's say it was £9.99, you've still got to get to and from the airport. And the last time I checked, the Stansted Express is £26.70, so you're already at £36.70, and then to get from Edinburgh to the airport, the bus, the tram, you've got to that £40 average price point. And that's if you were lucky enough to get the very cheapest £9.99 aviation fare, which would be you being lucky enough to get our cheapest fare, which actually can be as low as £26. But in reality, we know that flying is more than that for most people, and so we believe that the fares do correlate, and that actually if you have a fare comparison end-to-end journey, because we're city to city, a Lumo fare absolutely is competitive. And then on journey time, we're 4 hours 20, Edinburgh-London, plane about an hour. Well, you've got to get to the airport at least an hour beforehand, and if you really want to be cautious and allowing for any traffic delays, you get there even earlier than that. You've got to get to the airport, and you've got to get back from the airport to where you're going to again. So city to city, 4 hour 20 journey time is absolutely comparable to the similar comparable time you would use for flying. I think the Edinburgh-London route, it's the longest, more popular destination. Obviously you've got Inverness and places like that, but that's probably about the extreme of where that flying journey time is comparable to a train journey time, city to city. But that's fine, because that's a sizable chunk of the UK. So you start looking at Manchester or other places. If the train is definitely going to be more competitive. And then my favourite comparison, I'm biased because I wrote this slide, is around your productivity on board, be that socially or be that for business. Because of course, as you know, if you're on an aeroplane, you've got to put it all away to go through security, you've got to put it all away to go up the steps to get on the plane, you've got to put it away for takeoff, you've got to put it away for landing. On a train, you can do whatever it is, be it on your smartphone or reading a book or Kindle or laptop. You can do it for the duration of the journey, and therefore we really think that train absolutely wins in terms of the productivity of your journey versus all the different steps of where you've got to stop, start on a plane journey. So yeah, Lumo is a very, very credible option in terms of shifting away from aviation, and that's what we're doing. So just putting a few things into pictures, reflecting on our first couple of years of running. We like cake, so we've done some cakes to celebrate birthdays. We do lots in the community, so we've just done some work supporting Gateshead Football Club, one of our community football partners. We've got local produce on board. Rington's tea is proudly served on our trains because we're proudly from Newcastle, and if anybody's been to Newcastle, Rington's tea is a northeast institution. We have their ginger snap biscuits on board as well. They're really, really nice. Everybody loves those. We picked up a couple of awards along the way. We also have our own train beer at Lumo that's brewed on our route, so not just exclusive to Hull. We've done, as I say, a whole host of community partnerships. And Lumo's offices, here's a fantastic point if you're into your rail history, Lumo's offices are on the exact site of George Stephenson's Locomotive Works, where the railways were first founded. And that's just celebrated its bicentenary. So 200 years ago, 1823, was when that factory was first opened. And those of you who are into our history will know that next year the whole of the UK rail industry will be celebrating Railway 200, the 200th anniversary of the first passenger train actually operating. And so, yeah, just ahead of that, we've actually branded special commemorative plaque on the side of one of our trains, Unit 005, if you're into fleet numbers. And we got some of the representatives from the George Stephenson Society along with that on the side of one of our trains and our stations. So we're really proud to say that where the railways were first imagined 200 years ago, Lumo is now reimagining what today's railways could look like. And the boiler shop, the one building that still stands is the boiler shop, and that's actually immediately behind our office in Newcastle city centre. So yeah, that sort of history is really important to us as well. We might be this sort of modern, forward-looking company, but we're not shy of remembering where we've come from and the role that we have to play as part of the wider railway and the communities that we serve. And look, we do the same things at Hull. We've celebrated the coronation. We've had colleagues doing charity marathons, dressed as things, sports partnerships. Here's the grand launch of bringing back standard class catering with our wonderful trolleys being wheeled down a red carpet with this brilliant local produce, Atom beer, Lister's crisps. If anybody's familiar with Sheffield, we've got Henderson's Relish on Hull Trains. Now, at the time that we launched this with Henderson's Relish crisps on board, it was a little bit of a, well, we already have quite a lot of customers from Sheffield that connect into us at Doncaster. I think the people in the office thought I was mad when I said we need to have Henderson's Relish crisps on board the trains. Of course, since then, you all now know that we're applying to run services from Sheffield, which is another good reason to have a great local partner on board. But yet, people understand it now, and we proudly have that on board. Yorkshire Day, I'm promised a whippet for when we celebrate it this year. They could only get me a flat cap last year, but we have 2 services a day that extend to and from Beverley, which is the spiritual home of Yorkshire Day. We are, of course, in Yorkshire for that, so we do celebrate that. And then top right is a Howden station. That's with David Davis MP, just at the tail end of last year. And that's part of our passenger improvement investment fund. So we don't just run trains and pay others into the station access charges to run the stations for us. We do actually have, as part of our track access agreement, a commitment to invest some money into some hard infrastructure as well. So we've just completely replaced the platform surface at Howden. That's a great station there. It's just down the road from the brand new Siemens plant at Gore, which is going to be building some of the London Underground rolling stock and other rolling stock across the UK. They're good friends of ours down there, although we're not running Siemens trains, but their execs come into Howden and then change onto a bus service to go to their factory as well. So it's seeing great growth, and it was in desperate need of some investment there. We've done a few other tactical investments, and we've got some others in the pipeline too. So there's some pictures to bring things to life. So I've mentioned the huge differences in the businesses in terms of the market and the offer for customers, but actually there are some things that are similar behind the scenes. Firstly, I'm the MD of both of them, so there must be a reason for that, mustn't there? Well, of course there is. They are both, at their heart, open access operations. But we are also running to the same rail industry safety standards. We're running this very similar type of trains. They're Hitachi AT300 trains, and they're on a maintenance contract with Hitachi as well, so they do all the maintenance. The Lumo ones are all electric, the whole ones are bi-mode. We have to retail through the same rail industry commercial systems, and we use the same customer contact centre arrangements that's a sort of FirstGroup standard. And then occasionally we have major projects to manage, such as the platform works at Howden, so we have a team that does that. So those areas are common across both organisations. We work on a basis of do it once, deploy it twice, on the things where we can be efficient and where it makes sense. But the core day-to-day of our colleagues and our customer-facing activities and our presence in both of those local markets is still completely separate. And we believe that's the right model because they are very different businesses focusing on different markets. But as I say, I do have a shared team in those areas that report directly into me. I've mentioned the team a few times. You can have the best tools and plans and all the rest of it. It's the people that go out there and make it happen. And I'm really proud of the great team of people that we have in both of our organisations. So we do lots with them. We do lots in working communities that we serve. We have a modern and inclusive culture, as you'd expect of any professional business in 2024. But we also do lots to celebrate the success of their activities and make sure they're armed with the right information. I do regular team video updates on our colleague apps. We do weekly newsletters. And yeah, we go in for some of the awards activities as well. And there's a brilliant story, probably one of the things that the team's most proud of in Hull, particularly, is that Hull Trains has the highest percentage of female train drivers anywhere in the UK. It's a really good story. We've got a very near 50-50 balance of the overall team in terms of gender diversity in Hull Trains, but actually in terms of the driving team, it's the highest percentage. And they are predominantly colleagues who have joined us over that 24-year history of the company, mainly in on-board roles, so coming on board as an on-board host on the catering side of the operation, progressing to being an on-board manager, or guard in other language, and then going into being a driver. It's a brilliant story of career progression, and it's great that we've got that long service of colleagues, and yeah, getting them in the cabs as well. And we now train our own drivers as well. So we've got a full training school in both Hull and in Newcastle. We're about to launch our train driver simulators shortly. We've got some brand new state-of-the-art multi-million-pound simulators in both businesses as well. So yeah, really good colleague engagement and development story. And we do an annual survey, as most large organisations do now, around their colleagues, a colleague engagement survey. Both businesses have got an 80% minimum, they're 80% plus engagement score, which in a transport operation is really high, really high if people know those sorts of things. I was very proud, I think last time I stood up here talking about a Reading Buses score of 78%, and that was seen as industry leading. This is next level, and it's thanks to the great teamwork, team spirit, family feel, if you like, of both of these organisations. And that's another reason to preserve the sort of separate identity, brand and culture and customer focus. Different markets, different groups of colleagues, but hyper-local, and we want to preserve that and make sure that helps deliver. So I'm going to go into a little bit of more technical detail now about how an open access operator comes about being. So Lumo, remember me saying it started in October 2021, was actually first thought about in March 2015. These are things that take many years to come into being. And for somebody who's spent just over half of their career in bus, that balance is probably going to tip in the next couple of years. And I'll say I've spent more in rail than I have in bus. But the timescales in terms of trying to move stuff along in rail, as somebody who's spent and seen bus, are really frustrating, actually, because everything takes really long. Really long time for stuff to happen. And so one of the things that being a bit sort of challenging and entrepreneurial and open access is we try and make things happen a bit quicker and cut through some of the bureaucracy, obviously safely, obviously appropriately, but move things along. And certainly some of the expansion plans that we've set out recently, we've set some quite ambitious timescales as to how quickly we think they can be mobilised once we've had access rights granted. But back to the start of Lumo, it was in 2015 that FirstGroup first applied for rights to run on the East Coast Main Line. It then had to go through all the application process with the rail regulator, has to go through dialogue with Network Rail to demonstrate that the gaps in the timetable that have been identified do exist, that if you put trains in those gaps, that they could run reliably, and then you have to pass that, what I mentioned earlier, not primarily abstractive, NPA test. And of course, there was other services being proposed at the time. The economic appraisal happened, you had to demonstrate the capacity, and then finally, May 2016, decision, it was approved. By October, the agreement was placed, firm rights starting from May 2021. So the mobilisation, once you've done all the sort of planning and the rest of it, which took just over a year, because this was about a brand new operation and with brand new trains, that's actually added quite a bit into the process. So it's taken from 2016 to 2021 to then order the fleet, recruit the team, train the team, and get the operations mobilised. 5 years of planning, which is written in that sleeve there. And all of this carried on during the pandemic. And just to put it into perspective, that half of Lumo's train drivers were trained from scratch as well, brand new to the industry, people trained from scratch. We've refined that process now, and it's our default approach is to bring in and shape our own people in our own culture and how we operate at Lumo. We do still directly recruit occasionally, but generally if we're running recruitments of around 4 or 5 people, that's quite a nice efficient group to have as a cohort and train ourselves. And it's also, as we've seen with the Hull Train story, a great progression opportunity to develop talent from within and improve our sort of diversity credentials, if you like. So the biggest part of that really is rolling stock. You want brand new trains, they take a very long time to build. But even if you had fleet available, as we hope to have for some of the plans that we've got in for Sheffield, you're still looking at 1 year being a very ambitious mobilisation timescale. By the time you've recruited and trained, you've sorted out your fleet, your maintenance arrangements and all the rest of it. So compare that with some of the things you might see in bus, 12 to 18 weeks really to get a new route off to the ground if you've applied for the Traffic Commissioner, sometimes less in exceptional circumstances. You can see why sometimes we get a bit frustrated with how long things take. But it is right and proper that they've done properly. The rail industry, rail sector, very complicated, huge safety considerations to make sure that things are done properly. You're dealing with much bigger, more expensive, more complicated machines and far more interface points with all the different bodies that are out there and certainly the track and the station infrastructure as well. And then if you're into timetabling, here's a bit of a slide that just sort of shows the current diagrams of how the fleet is used and how these trains have to be weaved in around all the other services on the route. And of course, all the other services on the route aren't running necessarily to all the stations that we're running to. Some of them are stoppers and semi-fast and long. So there are, we want to keep refining this position in terms of journey time. It would be wonderful to reach a clock face timetable. Hull Trains has pretty much got to a near clock face timetable these days. As I say, that growth of services. Lumo isn't there yet, but it is the starting point with those 5 return services. So some are faster than others, and the train I intend to catch home off this presentation this evening because I live in Newcastle. The 2027 from King's Cross to Newcastle is the fastest timetabled passenger train ever on the East Coast Main Line. As much as we've got some services that take a little bit longer than we'd like because of the pathing arrangements, we've also got one of the fastest, or the fastest, in the timetable at the moment. But yeah, lots of capacity constraints have to be considered. There has been some investment into some of these by Network Rail, but yeah, that's where we are today, and that's the sort of graphical visualisation of some of the complexities around timetabling. I'm conscious I'm telling you a sort of blended story between Hull Trains and Lumo, but Lumo is the most recent example and certainly the one that people I think get most excited about in terms of its innovation credentials and being freshly doing something different. I just thought it'd be important to take a bit of time to talk about what that innovation looks like in terms of an open access operator, because firstly I think the model of open access operation, even though it is approaching 25 years old, is innovative in its very self, but also the Lumo model of taking that sort of great value fair approach and sustainability credentials is new and certainly hasn't been done before. The way Lumo is resourced in terms of how we structure things on board the train is quite different. So it's driver controlled operation for the train. So the drivers are doing the doors, and then we have 2 ambassadors on board. So it's not driver only, it's driver controlled. It's a very, very important difference there. And then those colleagues on board are multifunctional. So it is the same group of colleagues doing the initial ticket checks and safety checks that then come through with the catering trolley, that then come through to do a tabletop litter pick with the rubbish bag. Compare that to most long distance operators, that's 3 different groups of colleagues. So you can see how we're getting a more efficient model here. But actually, that's no different to what you would see on an aeroplane. And unsurprisingly, most of our onboard colleagues, or a high number of them, have come from the aviation sector and say, well, this is second nature to us. This is how we work. So it's a multifunctional, bit more efficient model, backed up by really strong engagement and how we recognise and reward what they do as a great team. I think certainly that one class offer on board Lumo, and it's, people say, oh, it's all standard class. You could say it's all first class, depends on your view on it, but it's a good quality standard, is different. We've not seen that before on a long distance operation on a UK railway. Look, everybody's talking about the environment, but we are particularly hyper-focused on it in terms of our sustainability credentials. Being a paper-free digital business is new, particularly in the railway. We have 2 forms in the office. They're the only bits of paper that we use in our routine day-to-day operations. And we've got a frame for them by the door for when colleagues come in. And there's a sticker on there apologising for them, explaining that the reason why we have to have these 2 bits of paper in our paper-free office is that they are safety forms for any signalling matters that relate obviously to Network Rail and the bigger railway. We're not blaming them, but we're just saying that we are a paper-free office, but legally we have to have these 2 forms just in case. They're the only things we've not been able to digitise. They involve third parties beyond us, but that's it. There's not even a printer in the office. So it's all paper-free. And yeah, that goes hand in hand with the environmental focus in terms of being paper-free. And then the final one is we're continually focusing on what we can do with new technology. So people may have heard of something called driver advisory systems. That's an in-cab device that helps optimise the sort of power draw for drivers, optimal places to accelerate, optimal places to brake, how to keep to time. FirstGroup, working with Hitachi, the train manufacturer, working on something called CDAS, which is connected DAS, which will mean that advice dynamically changes depending upon where the train is in relation to its schedule and where it is in relation to trains in front and behind it. So it's a live moving picture rather than just the base position with the schedule. And then we are we have a seat at the table on something called the East Coast Digital Programme. This is the digital railway in-cab signalling, which is coming on the south end of the East Coast Main Line over the next few years. It's already underway on the Great Northern Tunnel section into Moorgate with GTR Thameslink. That's going on all operator services on the East Coast Main Line over the next couple of years. So we'll be having that in-cab signalling on our trains too. And that's just two examples of some of the stuff that we're doing on digital systems and wider projects. Well, I said Lumo's exciting, and it is, because it's all new and colourful and the rest of it. But actually, the lesser told story is the huge impact of Hull Trains, which, as I say, is the sort of grandfather, or would be gender neutral, grandparent of the UK rail sector in terms of open access. And actually, if you look at it, it's probably, I need to refine the words around this claim, but it's got to be now the longest consistently operated long distance operator, because I think even Great Western, which hasn't technically changed hands, it was a management buyout, then became part of FirstGroup since privatisation. And yes, this was started by a wonderful group of people who were under something called GB Railways at the time, so John Nelson and Mike Jones, who had the vision to start Hull Trains. But actually, in terms of it being called Hull Trains, how it's structured, how it's focused, it's stayed the same. It's been a constant. There's been no big changes like you see in some of the rest of the franchised railway in terms of reshaping and branding, and none of that's happened here. So I think probably the only original names you would see if you went back to privatisation in the late 90s, early noughties that are still here today is probably just Hull Trains and Chiltern Railways. I do stand to be corrected on that, though. There'll be somebody else that will say, you've forgotten about this operation here. But even GWR was, of course, first Great Western, then Great Western Railway before it. So it's been a constant and a long-running constant now, and over that time it has achieved many great things. And so we commissioned Arup to look at, great that it does great things as a train company, what's the benefit of that in terms of the wider communities that it serves? What's the transformation of taking a city like Hull and the region around it and taking it from having one direct train to London a day to 8 direct trains to London a day, which is where we are now, hopefully going to continue to grow. And as well as having Hull as a destination on that departure board at London, which means a hell of a lot to many northern communities. I know that from our friends at Grand Central as well, who talk similarly about the same with having Bradford and Sunderland on there as well. Actually, the Hull train has made it to Harry Potter World in the US. That's the train they give as an example of platform 9 3/4. So it's done that. But in terms of hard facts and figures, there's what Arup have done is quantified what this means for the communities that we serve. So time savings of journeys, growth in direct employment, modal shift and all the air quality benefits of getting people onto a cleaner mode of transport, reduced congestions, and then of course the fare savings, because we are enabling more people to travel at cheaper fares. That's a really important part of all of this. They have calculated that Hull Trains is estimated to have delivered between 185 and 380 million pounds of benefits. So this is benefits to the wider economy in the 20 years since launch, and that over the next 10 years, because we've got a track access agreement for another 10 years at the moment, we hope to get that extended, from 140 to 320 million pounds. So big economic benefits. And just to drill down into some of those, I've mentioned the growth in number of services. That, of course, grows the number of seats as well. So we've got regular growth in the number of seats. And this is about growth in journeys. So you can see here that Hull Trains is massively outstripping industry averages in terms of not only passenger recovery to pre-pandemic numbers, but also growth as well. Hull Trains is that top line, 130% now. So huge increase in services, seating capacity, and of course faster trains as well that I mentioned. We are flexible, we are able to respond more agilely to the market. So when we have the Challenge Cup final and Hull Kingston Rovers and Hull FC's at home and people are away in London, we've actually put extra trains on. Very few people can do that as quickly and as agile as we can as a sort of small local community-focused business. Deliver reliably, we've picked up various awards for that as well. As I say, we've increased the speed of the trains. And all these elements all contribute to that very big number that I said at the start. And then, of course, we've grown employment ourselves in terms of having 125 people who are based in an operation in Hull that wasn't there before. But actually, by having a better train service, some of those places along the route have been able to grow, and that in turn has helped fuel the growth in jobs and housing as well. The Siemens factory is in Gaul because it's got very good shipping links to get goods and materials in, very good motorway road links, and is very close to a decent train service as well. It's all helping with these sorts of things. The University of Hull is my favourite example, just to put very simply, the benefits of Hull Trains to a community. And it could be any train company, I'm sure, but the one that we know of where we're based. So the University of Hull has seen a 46% increase in international students in recent years, which they say just wouldn't be possible if we didn't have a decent train link to London that people can then connect into Heathrow and Gatwick Airport. They're just opening now a London campus, again, which wouldn't be possible if they weren't well connected to London. And then even things like Hull being European City of Culture in 2017. Leader of the council will say, well, unthinkable that we could have been that, again, if we didn't have good, decent transport links, of which Hull Trains is a really important part of. So what I like about what open access rail operations are able to do in terms of growing the market and working with the communities that they serve is bring that much wider benefit. And that's what we've tried to do with these numbers. And that's why, yes, Lumo, really exciting story, but don't forget the nuts and bolts of actually some of the stuff that's going on, that's been going on for many, many years. And of course, we've replicated, you can replicate this for other operators. We have got a Lumo version of this report as well. But actually, I think this is an undertold story at the moment in terms of some of these grassroots nuts and bolts details for Hull Trains. Hull's got a far greater graduate retention rate than many other places across the UK, which is interesting. And the fares points, we offer fares that are generally cheaper than alternatives, and that has a halo effect of keeping fares down. And it's interesting when you hear real-life community examples of, I wanted to go to this football match, or I wanted to go to see this at the theatre, but I couldn't justify the train trip. But actually, the cheaper fares of a Hull Trains or a Lumo have enabled that journey. So this isn't just about switching people from other modes of transport. This is also about doing things that grow the market too. So look, there's lots of facts and figures in there. I'm not going to go into all of them. I'm also very mindful of time as well, but it's all good stuff, and it's all written by people who can back it up with facts and figures, who are far more intelligent than me, and have put it in a wonderful report that's on our website if you want to know more about it. So let's go through all these wonderful facts and figures. What's next? Well, we want to keep doing what we're doing, and we want to make sure that we're getting the message out there to say, look, open access is a good thing. We're not sitting here and saying it's a silver bullet that's going to answer all of the rail industry's challenges at the moment, but it's certainly something that can help complement the rest of the UK rail network, where there is clear demand and where there is capacity to put services on, or we can work with partners to create more capacity. There is definitely space for it, and we're getting out there and saying that message. You may have read some of the interviews I've done in both the trade and other press titles in recent times, and if you haven't, I'm sure you'll hear more about it, certainly following this. But in the meantime, we want to make sure we're also backing it up by continuing to deliver the great service that our team does. I'm biased, but I do think it's good. We've got our customer satisfaction survey results are coming out very shortly, and they show 96% overall satisfaction, so that's good as well. But we want to make sure we're continuing to shape and evolve what we do on board, and that's why we've done things like a customer satisfaction survey, to get that feedback, to see what could be even better. We know that on Lumo, the seat material is not very good, and therefore shows up all the marks. So we're currently working with Hitachi to get the seats covering changed on those trains. We know that if you use the internal slimline toilets on some of these trains, you can often open the door and find a pool of water over the floor, and it's not because somebody's done something unpleasant on there, it's because the taps and the sensors are actually the wrong way round, and we're getting them switched round. That's not just our trains, by the way, but actually if the tap was further in the sink and the sensor was on the outside, it would keep the water in the sink instead of it running down the side and making the floor messy. And because we're smaller and we're more in touch with the detail, and we go out on our trains and we see what's happening, we can see these things, and we can work with our partners to respond. So we always want to keep evolving what we're doing on board. We're going to be doing more on train catering. We want to be shouting more about our sustainability credentials, particularly at Hull. I think the all-electric train message has landed really well at Lumo, but actually Hull's message is just as powerful, and certainly when you compare the emissions of our fleet of Hitachi trains there in comparison to the old Class 180 fleet, it's chalk and cheese. We want to keep doing more on innovation, obviously make sure we're keeping supporting our colleagues and keeping them engaged, and then yes, we will keep promoting the good news of open access, the case for open access. We really do believe this isn't just about train journeys, this is about, if you like, a form of levelling up for these communities actually, but better serving them and creating new jobs and helping keep fares keen for customers. There's huge customer benefits from this as well. And yes, open access operations on other routes. So we've recently announced plans to extend Lumo from Edinburgh to Glasgow. So we'll be going Glasgow, Edinburgh, Newcastle, London. That's in the final phases of confirming the timetable arrangements with Network Rail. We have the added dynamic of a devolved administration there, so we're working with Network Rail Scotland and Transport Scotland to agree that. Then we need to plug it into Network Rail nationally here in England, and then go through the approval process with the rail regulator, the Office of Rail and Road, and I've pressed the wrong button here, and then we've had for a good few months now our plans to bring the successful open access formula to Sheffield, which we're really excited about too, because Sheffield has one of the highest percentages of road journeys between it as a city and London. 75% of journeys from Sheffield to London are by road. That's a mix of cars and coach as well, and so we believe that there's huge untapped potential to bring in that sort of third tier, that other offer on rail, different fare offer, a different customer proposition, and shift people onto rail, as well as the just as exciting opportunities of opening up brand new links from places like Worksop and Woodhouse. So if you want to go to Worksop at the moment, most of the day it is a train via Nottingham and it takes 3 hours. This service will do it in an hour and a half because we're coming down the East Coast Main Line. So Worksop's not had a direct train to London since 1968, people who are older than me tell me, but certainly not in my lifetime. And Woodhouse is a great location in terms of tapping into that wider South Yorkshire area. It's got good road connections, it's got really good bus links into there as well, and we think that this is a great blend of bringing in customer choice by having another operator into the city of Sheffield, University City as well, good cost-conscious market, and then opening up new links from Woodhouse and Worksop, and then improving links at Retford. And this end of the route is really exciting because we think there's a big enough market for it today, but actually if you look at what's on the horizon, there's a brand new business park being built in a place called Waverley on the route. We could have our second station called Waverley that we serve as open access at some point maybe. And then there's a new atomic energy plant going in that part of the world as well, which once that gets going, that's going to have a huge increase in the number of jobs, and there'll be local housing and other supply chain businesses connect to it as well. So the market's big enough today, it's really exciting in the future, and we think that bringing in a new open access rail service can really help support all that will be going on in the economies there. So this is still working through the process with the regulator. There's a slight interdependency with the East Coast timetable change, which you may or may not have read about. It was released on Friday in Modern Railways magazine that the plans to do this new revolutionary East Coast timetable have been deferred from December. So we're just navigating the impact of that on us and on these plans. But yeah, we're looking to start an initial 2 journeys a day. It will be using existing rolling stock. We're saying that this will be mobilised within a year, getting access rights granted. So that's very ambitious. Back to my point about how long things take in the rail industry, and we hope that this will just be the start, and that we can continue to build and grow from that. Just in the same way as Hull Trains has demonstrated over those 24 years, 25 next year, of operation to date. It might not be that type of train, it might not look like that. The only reason why it says Hull Trains is that to do this quickly, we'll be doing it on the back of Hull Trains' safety certificate and systems and policies and existing operating regime, because to start a brand new rail operation, we obviously have to go through all the accreditation processes, so that will take a little bit longer. So the quickest route to market is, given its close proximity on the other side of Yorkshire, is to launch this as part of our Hull Trains operation rather than starting something completely brand new and operational. So, in closing, open access rail, we believe, grows the market. It's backed up by facts and figures that prove that. LNER, as the main operator on the East Coast Main Line, has also fully recovered to pre-pandemic levels of passengers and has grown beyond that, and that's with Lumo being a new operator and with the other open access operators reporting growth. There can be no accident that this is the only part of the UK's long-distance rail network that's happened. It is, we believe, because of the choice for customers and the halo effect of what open access brings in terms of that healthy competition. So that commercial entrepreneurialism and innovation benefits everyone. And of course, this is all at no cost to the taxpayer as an open access operator. It's delivering cheaper fares for customers, a whole host of wider benefits for the communities that we serve. And yeah, we are seeing that, particularly on Lumo, where we talk very publicly about environmental credentials, that people are making more environmentally conscious travel choices. But there's more to do. We think that the case study, particularly of Lumo, demonstrates that there is scope for more innovation on the UK rail network. We're really keen to be playing a part of it. And in these times where the railways are often in the headlines for the wrong reasons, we actually believe that open access is a very positive story for the UK and for the rail sector and for the communities that we serve. And that's me in open access. Thank you. Right, so I think I'm on for questions now. There we go. Hopefully that's a useful insight into what we do and how we do it. It's unfortunately, being a sort of, the size of organisation that we are, and actually Lumo being very new, I'm not sort of full of historical pictures and some of the things that there wasn't that many train pictures in there, was there? But I can talk about the trains as well if that's what you want to talk about. So yeah, question to the floor, and we've got Tony down here with the first one.
Thank you, Martin. Great, and you bring a bright spot to the railway business. Would you ever work with public authorities to develop a service, a town that felt it needed to join up with the world? Would you find a partnership with a local authority acceptable?
Absolutely. So a lot of what's been developed, certainly in terms of Hull Trains history, had a lot of involvement with the local Chamber of Commerce and with the City Council and with MPs. So if we take Sheffield as an example, Bassett Law Council are probably our number one sort of supporters in terms of what we do. I went to a private meeting with one of their councillors, which I thought was just him and I walked into the room and there was 10 of them in there. Such was the enthusiasm and excitement about what we're trying to do. But yeah, those partnerships in terms of friendly support, we are already doing. In terms of something a bit deeper as a partnership, we certainly wouldn't say no. We're very keen to work with all partners, and I think these things are easier if you've got the local community on board and behind what you want to do. But yes, we absolutely would. Of course, for us being commercial entrepreneurial business that's not in receipt of any public subsidies, we've got to make sure the math stacks up in terms of us going into a market. We get many weekly suggestions of, well, could you run here, could you run here, could you run here? And we have to make sure that firstly, there is a market to justify that, and then secondly, are there gaps in the timetable? Can we actually fit those trains on the graph? And then we can consider the application process. But Sheffield and Glasgow are keeping us pretty busy at the moment.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, Martin, thanks very much for a fascinating talk.
Oh, no problem.
Lumo offers really good value fares if you're travelling from London to Edinburgh. But if you want to take a longer journey, you don't seem to have any add-ons. So, for example, I was looking yesterday, so I'm going to Edinburgh in a few months' time. I can't buy a ticket from Southend to Edinburgh on Lumo.
No.
You drop off even on your own booking
Yes.
engine, you drop off and only LNER tickets are offered. And then when you look at their pricing, you are no longer competitive compared to a Southend to London ticket added, normal fare added on to your fares. So is there any way to get around that?
Yes, not too easily, but yes, there is. So we've got a whole project underway on what's called and connections fares. So we actually have quite a number of connections tickets already available that tap into and unblock exactly what you're saying there. It's obviously easier where there are organisations that we've already got relationships with, but we've got about 10 destinations through Scotland. So Glasgow, for example, does come up as a through fare. It's actually our number one add-on destination, and hence why we're saying, there's demand there's a market. We need to be doing more about that. Sheffield has been one on Hull Trains for a number of years. So they do exist. They take a little bit of work. It needs both train operators to agree to putting that through connection fare in. They need to agree an apportionment of the split of where the revenue goes, and then they need to be hard-coded into the rail retail system. Now, I'd love everybody to buy their tickets through our retail channels, because then we get all the commissions and all the rest of it, but other third-party retailers are available, and some of them have now the sort of split ticketing type tools in there, and they will break the journey into two halves and sell it to you as one, so that you get the best value. But yeah, we can look at Southend, definitely. I'll come and report back next time I see you as to what we can do on that. But yeah, it's something that we're keen to do more of, but there isn't a press a button and does every single station in the whole of the UK rail network answer to that. We're also looking at Eurostar at the moment as well, because it should be a no-brainer in terms of journey opportunities. We come into King's Cross and you cross the road and there's St Pancras, but even that's not as easy as that.
Okay, thank you.
No problem, thank you. Mark.
The National Railway is in a terrible state of limbo at the moment. I don't know what the outcome will be, possibly under a Labour government, but they're going to need to put more bums on seats and get control of costs. So in terms of, notwithstanding any trade union power, in terms of your staffing model and your responsiveness to untapped demand, what could the National Railway learn from what you're doing?
Well, I think that the number one lesson for me is that if you can run dependably, and I'm using the word dependably versus reliability, because there's all sorts of factors that affect reliability at the moment. We're seeing sort of heightened infrastructure challenges in terms of some of the weather stuff and cable theft and very tragic events such as fatalities, which all impact our performance. But what I can say is that we run very dependably. We might sometimes have to run late because of some of those events, but we will run. And on the very occasions that we won't run, we go to great lengths to try and manage and reduce the pain of things on customers. But that's the exception, not the norm. The key thing is that we run, and so we are not being disrupted by some of the stuff that you're seeing across the rest of the UK rail network at the moment. And I think first and foremost, our model demonstrates the size of the market that's out there and the level of passenger recovery that can be delivered if you can run a reliable, consistent operation that's not being interrupted by some of the things that are going on at the moment under the current model. So I think that's the first thing. In terms of the staffing model, well, actually Hull Trains is more traditional. It's more traditional. It's like the rest of the railway in terms of how it's structured, but it's still efficient. It's still efficient in terms of everybody being aligned to knowing that we are only successful if we get customers on board our services and deliver the best possible service that we can, and that we need to keep check of our costs. So we don't have a lavish HQ. We don't have hundreds of people behind the scenes. We keep control of those costs. And I'm not suggesting that other operators don't, but what we have in our model is control of both the costs and the revenue, and we see it on the same page. And I think some very senior figures in the rest of the railway have been critical of the current regime, where those costs and revenue are managed in different parts of their client body, and that they're not as empowered as private organisations to pull all of the levers that they traditionally would be. Just to do costs can be a bit of a blunt instrument when actually some of the power of organisations like ours is that sort of commercial innovation and flexibility and freedom to do things that can grow the market and maximise the market. So it's a bit of a long-winded answer, but I do believe that if we can get the structure right and settle down some of the things that are disrupting the network at the moment, that actually we can get things back as a wider rail sector. And we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that up until it was only sort of a year or so before the pandemic that prior to that we had railways that were still the envy of the rest of the world. Since the privatisation of the railway in the mid-90s, it unlocked record levels of investment. It drove a huge greater focus on the customer, and it drove customer growth to unprecedented levels. And with that came the revenue and some degree of cost control. We seem to lose that in the final couple of years, and then the pandemic's kind of really taken away and shifted the focus onto other, perhaps bigger or different topics. But I think if we can get back to that, we can be successful. And what I didn't mention in my presentation is Italy and Spain. So, the sort of liberalisation, let's not use the word privatisation, that can get emotive, could get political, liberalisation of what the railway and commercially minded railway people can deliver. The UK really sort of set the agenda for that and was a bit of a trailblazer, and as I say, I think the envy of the world. And in terms of open access, that's a great example of what that was able to enable, all of the things that I've spoken to you about today. But I stand here today actually saying that the shining examples now of open access beyond what I've spoken to you about, because I think that's really good, but I'm biased, are actually in Italy and in Spain. So Italy has the dominant open access operator there, Italo. I think it's on their third wave of new rolling stock and expansion. And then in Spain, they've just quietly got on with this fantastic deregulation of some of their high-speed lines that's led to considerable increases in the number of trains, massive reductions in fares and costs for customers, and growth of the market. I'd love to be here with some proper facts and figures to back that up, and I'm putting some slides together on that because I think it's actually a story that we could learn from as the UK. That's probably the first time in certainly my living memory that the UK has really looked commercially to another country in terms of its railway operating model and what can be achieved. Right, right. We'll go to the gentleman in the middle, and then we'll go to Alec at the back.
Martin, I used
Alex at the back first, then. Go on, then.
your services for the first time the other week, and I was very impressed.
Oh, thank you.
However, I didn't set out intentionally to use Lumo, but I only booked tickets through Split My Fare, and they gave me the option that seemed the most attractive. So I wondered, relating back to Richard's question, is how do you interact with these third-party agencies?
Yeah, so the UK has something called impartial retailing regulations. So it means that even on our app, we have to retail other operators' tickets. And that's why we try and focus on making sure that our tickets offer the best value so that you're drawn to them, particularly because we've only got 5 trains a day in each direction on Lumo. So, the timings you might have to change to suit the train. But we do interact with the other ticket retailers, as does the rest of the industry. Probably the largest for us is the train line. We've got very good relationships with train line. Actually, I'm going to talk at their management conference in the next month. Look, they're focused just on ticket retailing and just on that part of the customer experience. And so therefore they, some might say, can do that even better than an operator that's running trains and people and catering and all the rest of it. Then you've got ticketing. We're trying to do it all. They are just focusing on ticketing, and actually they're doing a really good job at it. And there's some great innovations that are coming out in rail ticketing that perhaps, as part of rail reform, maybe slightly controversial. Do we need to look at where some of those things sit and are best led, in terms of operator skill sets and what's the core focus? Bearing in mind a hell of a lot goes into running trains and getting colleagues in the right places and making that work. And technology is gaining, its capabilities, AI and automation, all the rest of it. That's quite a lot to keep pace with when you're also doing all these very technical things over here. So, keeping in touch with the third-party retailers is a very important part of what we do. The challenge to third-party retailing, I shall forever have ringing in my head the words of one of my great former leaders when I worked for Go Ahead, which is David Brown, is who owns the customer? So we've just got to make sure that if somebody else is taking the lead on retailing, where does that customer relationship sit? And that's particularly key for us as an open access rail operator because, as I said at the start, we live or die by getting customers on board our trains, and therefore we have to make sure we still have some ownership of that customer relationship, even if it's been retailed by somebody else.
Just to come back to your point about sort of ticketing with other train companies. My understanding, and perhaps I don't understand railways properly, is that the franchised operators now operate on a management fee, and the revenue is an issue for the government and us as the taxpayer. Therefore, why do you talk to the train operator and not the DfT about the apportionment of the money between you and the operator if you have a through journey using the two services?
Yes, but so you're right in so much as the revenue risk at the moment with those contracts is, they're on fixed management fees, but part of those management fees is paying those operators to protect the revenue of the government stroke treasury. So they all still have revenue management teams, they are all still managing their revenue systems, their retailing systems, and so therefore those technical discussions and those commercial discussions are actually with each individual train operating company, not, the DfT is not presiding over a national rail retailing engine.
Martin, thanks for a fascinating presentation. We could go on, I think, for a week discussing all the points you've raised. I want to just correct you, if I may, on one thing, which is that the Stockton and Darlington was certainly not the first passenger railway. In fact, the Friends of the Stockton and Darlington spent some time wondering what on earth the Stockton and Darlington actually brought to the world and concluded that it was the first modern railway. You know, it had got the parliamentary powers. It was, the nearest term, I guess, is a common carrier. But you may like to note that it was also an open access operator.
Yes,
If you could get some motive power, which might be a steam engine, it might be a horse, if you could get some trucks and you could stick them on the lines, then the S&D would fit them in somehow to the timetable. So I think you could well say that you are celebrating 200 years of open access as well. But my main question is, what about integration? You've had pretty well a 50-50 split in your career so far. Hull has got one of the better private operators. It was so under its previous owner, and it's certainly so again under Go Ahead. What about offering through tickets to Scarborough or to Beverley or any of the places on that coast and in the hinterland, even to Pickering?
Really good question, John. And yet, no, thank you for the clarification point on the Stockton and Darlington Railway. And look, we're not leading on the Railway 200. We'll make sure we play our part on it. But our big message has been where we are based is where the railways were first imagined by Stevenson. But I know that there's all sorts of splinter groups, for want of a better word, who claim that their wagon way perhaps was a railway. So it was interesting to have your clarification point about what's what and where there. We're very good friends with Beamish Museum in the North East. We do lots of work with them. We've just signed up as a partner to support the Tanfield Railway, who will claim to be the world's oldest railway. But that predates Stevenson. So, the people who have a greater knowledge of the deep history of 200 plus years, I'm in awe of. So thank you for that there, John. In terms of the integration piece, look, as you know, we've worked together on the board of CILT and have known you for many years. I am super passionate about transport integration. And I've watched and lived through some real disintegration of public transport. I think it's a real shame that even though some operations ultimately come under the same sort of roof, be it ownership, be it through to level, that actually I don't think we're very good at integrated transport as a country. It's a real shame. I watched it before I joined Reading Buses as chief exec, but in that time there, from buses being parked right alongside the railway station, very nice and easy to find every single bus, to them being pushed out onto 7 different streets around there, and that's not integration, is it? And people were celebrating a multi-million-pound investment in a brand new railway station, but all of a sudden there was nothing for buses, and you couldn't even put signs up for buses because they would have said go that way because they were in 2 different directions. Now, we worked really hard with the town council. We put the hub in outside the station, screens, and we did try and colour codes and things and get better signage there. I mean, Newcastle is I made this point to the mayor candidates for the combined authority elections that are happening in May to say, where I live in Gateshead, coming into Newcastle, my bus home from the station is a 4-minute walk from the station, but my bus into town is a 15-minute walk to the station because of the layout of the city centre and one-way systems and where the bus infrastructure is. And that's under a metropolitan authority. So, you know, they should really have integration high up their agenda. I think the challenge is that the bodies that can bring these things together, you know, as a bus operator on their own, they can't do it. As a rail operator on their own, they often can't do it. And I really struggle because I don't run any stations. My stations are all run by third-party operators who we pay to do our stuff for them. We do pay under something called station access charging regimes, but I'm not directly in control of any hard infrastructure that's customer-facing. But we are doing some things. So we actively promote the Plus Bus add-on ticket. I still think it's one of the most undersold golden eggs of the UK public transport network in terms of integration. At the moment, things are slightly tempered because of the £2 bus fare. So some of the value of these things and some of the sort of how you would bring them together economically is slightly out of kilter because of the £2 bus fare. And so therefore, you know, there's probably parts of the UK where the plus bus fare is, you know, if you was only doing one trip, you simply wouldn't do that. You just go and buy your £2 on the bus. So I think we'll be watching with interest to see where the economics of the bus sector return to in the coming year and a bit. I've got the relations with the operators. You know, Ben at East Yorkshire absolutely is great. He used to work for me. We're talking at the moment about some of the stuff that we can do in terms of the university, travel to and from the university, given the London campus, given that they have lots of people coming up from London across the whole of the year. Can we tie together an integrated product? We do talk to Nexus and Transport North East. Even though I'm not a bus operator, I'm still proudly flying the flag for my plan to make the high-level bridge two-way traffic light controlled, so bi-directional, to get the buses closer to the railway station. Through our passenger investment fund, there might be some opportunities for us to invest in some bus-facing infrastructure that's linked to railway stations to improve some of that things as well. But yes, as an open access operator, my abilities to do things are a little bit limited, but I'm still championing the cause. And I'm really, really welcome hearing ideas, and I'm certainly still keeping those conversations going on integrated transport. And of course, ticketing, I mean, you know, that's really at a regional level, and as a long-distance operator, we're not really into regional ticketing. But we do have Plus Bus available on all our channels. And for the Edinburgh Fringe Festival last year, and we'll be doing it again this year, we had a great partnership with the Fringe Festival organisers. We did a big promotional activity to encourage people to travel there sustainably by train. And then we said, and buy the Plus Bus, because in Edinburgh, you don't just get the bus, you get the tram as well, and you can go around all the Fringe festival sites. So yeah, it's on our agenda, John.
It's been a fascinating talk. Thank you, Martin.
No, thank you.
You mentioned that you haven't talked about the trains themselves much so far, so I thought I'd ask, how did Lumo in particular sort of choose the specific fleets that you have? What led you to the Hitachi trains you've got? And I was wondering, do you have any plans for expansion, either in length of trains, number of trains, as you've grown so much and been so successful?
So I can't talk with any great detail on how that train fleet was chosen, because I wasn't there during the mobilisation. I've only been there just over 18 months. But what I can say is that if you look at the statistics in terms of fleet reliability, that Hitachi AT300 train works out of the box and is delivering the best operational performance of any modern long-distance train fleet. So much so that the Hull Trains is now in its second year of winning a Golden Spanner Award at Roger Ford's Modern Railways magazine Fleet Reliability Award. So we've had the second year of that, so best performing train fleet, and Lumo's picked up the Silver Spanner as well. So we've got the first and second position of most reliable modern train fleet of their class in the UK. And that reliability piece, particularly for an open access operator where it's a small fleet, you know, reliability is absolutely key. So we've got to have a good train fleet and one that works out the box. And look, it's a nice looking train. A lot of thoughts gone into, particularly the Lumo train with better seating as well. And Hitachi as a partner are well located along our route. And again, from a Lumo point of view, we can say they were assembled in the northeast of England at Newton Aycliffe, which is really good as well. In terms of plans to expand, so look, FirstGroup, who own us, haven't been shy in terms of talking about their appetite for open access. It's mentioned in the group annual results last year and in the interim results. We've announced Sheffield, we've announced Glasgow. They're both going to need new trains. On Lumo, if you've been on it, they're pretty busy for the bulk of the year, and therefore the next logical thing to do would be to do something in terms of the length of those trains. Nothing firm on the table at the moment. As you saw from the slide, it took 5 years from the point of the starting gun being fired to that service hitting the tracks, and the bulk of that was driven by how long it takes to procure and build and test and commission new rolling stock. So there's no quick solution to some of this. At the moment, one of our challenges on Lumo is around electrical supply capacity at the north end of the line. It's no secret, people who even built the line, a chap called Don was involved as the electrical engineer in the 80s in the East Coast Main Line. I had a fascinating chat with him. He's one of the patrons of the Stevenson Society that I mentioned earlier, and he said, well, north of Morpeth it's an electrical desert, and it really is, and that's still a challenge today in that actually north of Morpeth to Edinburgh, there are currently bi-mode trains that are having to run in diesel mode under those wires because there isn't the electrical capacity from the grid feeding into those wires to enable more electric trains. And for us, that also is, in the short term, constraining any opportunity to run longer trains. Laura was in Newcastle with Wesley when we had our second testing of a 10-car train at Lumo by using our spare set on a weekend, and we've not been able to do it since because of lack of electrical capacity in the lines. Now, we've still got a work stream underway with Network Rail. We're looking at whether we can run in D-rated mode. We've got to overcome that hurdle before we can then see what's next in terms of rolling stock strategy. But something will happen at some point soon. It's definitely on our radar, but it's not as easy as it would be in bus by saying, we'll place an order with ADL and it will be here in 6 months, or we'll go down to Ensign and get some tomorrow. It takes a bit longer in rail.
Thank you very much.
I think there's one question there, but I'm conscious that you've got a train.
That's fine, we're okay. We can keep going for a bit if you're okay.
Are you okay to get your train? I can't remember what time you said.
I'm fine, good.
Can you reassure me, I haven't travelled up to Edinburgh for a while, that if I'm delayed by over an hour, that you will do something to get me there, even if it means using another operator? I have read reports that, okay, you're a low-cost operator, but ticket acceptance when there's a problem is problematic, shall I say, with Lumo. Would you care to comment?
Yeah, certainly. So, look, I think first thing is, so one of my big tasks is to try and make open access normal. I think when Lumo first hit the tracks, it was seen as a bit of what's this weird thing, and trying to dispel this myth that we're there taking other people's customers away. So I have a good working relationship with David Horn, who's the MD at LNER. We both know that there is space in the market, we're doing complementary things, and therefore the working together is definitely happening now. And in terms of times of disruption, we are governed by rail industry standards. So there's something called these CSL levels in the industry, and if there is major disruption affecting all operators, then ticketing restrictions are relaxed, and we accept each other's tickets. So we've done a lot of work on building the relationships, dispelling that we're not some weird thing, and that, look, everybody's benefiting from this, we should be working together. Yes, everybody's their own business and we need to square that all off. But we do have arrangements in place. We can never guarantee it, because if everybody else's trains are full, they're not going to be able to carry our customers. But I think there's not a one yes answer to this, because there's all sorts of different factors as to how busy are the trains, how long is the disruption, where is it, are there diversion routes, the rest of it. But what I can tell you is this happens very occasionally now. We've got some really good contingency plans in place. If we can't run a train, my phone is ringing, and the team and I are really feeling the pain points. And number one on our radar is, what are we doing to move our customers? And I'm very mindful that during the early days, not to say that the team didn't have that on their radar, but the contingency plans hadn't been used before. The first time trains come, right, what do we do now then? Oh, they're saying no, and we haven't got this option over here and the rest of it. We're a lot more advanced now in terms of things. People who follow the real technical detail of us will actually notice that on 2 separate occasions now, we've moved a whole train to Lumo to keep services running. We actually had one day where we nearly hired a chartered train. Such is the focus to try and make sure we keep our customers in. So I can never say never, but what I can say to you is rest assured we go to great lengths to make sure we can move our customers. We will get you there by hook or by crook. Our customer service policy now in terms of refunds has had a lot of changes made to it in response to some of the feedback that you've probably seen, and the industry has got some pretty good protocols that mean that in times of disruption, operators do work with each other.
Thank you. That's clearly reassuring, and let's hope that in practice it actually happens. Should
Absolutely.
I have a problem?
We make sure it does. No problem. Thank you. Did we see one more question at the back? Did I see, or was that? Yeah, that's everybody. Wonderful. Oh no, there we go. Right. Was there somebody at the back? No, there wasn't. No. Right, there we go. Good. That's fine. I'm off the hook then. Brilliant. Thank you. And yes, so no, do please come and travel with us. It's a shame to finish on a question about disruption. That is the exception, not the norm. I can assure you.
I'm going to finish on a good point because actually my
Cheers.
sister-in-law lives in Hull.
Ah, brilliant.
And she's a great fan of Hull Trains. And when I went up there recently, I travelled on them, and it was a wonderful experience. And I was particularly impressed when I saw a person who'd previously been doing some other functions. She suddenly came to the train with a dustpan and brush.
Oh, yeah.
It was actually sweeping up the rubbish from the carpet. And I thought, I've never seen that on another operator.
Very proud of our trains, our team.
So it's very impressive. And so I'm a convert. In fact, one of my questions is, do you think the future is to deregulate other operators to provide more opportunities?
Oh, that's controversial, that. Look, the railway's a huge, complex beast. I think to deregulate what is already there will be a big challenge in terms of, all different contracts that exist. First and foremost, colleagues and their employment, but, train leasing, maintenance, etc. So I think that side of the structure of what's there is probably what's there. But in terms of where there is gaps in existing capacity and where there is new capacity, certainly on long distance routes, we would absolutely advocate that coming to the more entrepreneurial commercial free market to say, look, what can you do? And we would say, on the right route with the right opportunities, we can deliver that with no cost to the taxpayer and do it with some of the great things that I've spoken to you about this evening.
Brilliant. Well, thanks very much for an incredibly interesting talk. Shall we, Farewell, everyone. See you next time.